For Capture the CISO. I'm your host, Rich Straffolino. It has been a long and winding road, whatever the CISO equivalent is of extinguishing torches on an island. We've done that, and now we are down to our finalists. If this is the first time joining us, this is the show where you get to listen in on the conversations CISOs have with security vendors. Usually, these are happening away from you, behind closed obstacles, to pathways, to portals, if you will. Sometimes people call them doors, but we are putting them in front of you so you can get that front row seat. We've got a great chat room with us today. Lots of people jumping in there, getting excited about this. We're talking about Timex Sinclairs and old computers before the show. Really great stuff. So make sure you are checking that out as well. And we are excited to crown a champion at the end of the show. We're going to be doing it live. No one knows what's going to happen. That's half the fun. And we have our three finalist vendors that have braved previous episodes and have emerged victorious into the finals. We have Anvologic, Bugproof, and Nudge Security. Really excited to hear some more from them. They all really impressed our judges the first time around, so this is going to be a lot of fun. Now, you may be saying, Rich, these companies all do vastly different things. How are you possibly going to judge them? Well, they're going to be judged equally on the same three criteria by our illustrious judges. Is it innovative? Does it solve a real need? And how easy is it to deploy? And those aforementioned illustrious judges, we are going to be joined by them now. We have Edward Contreras, EVP and CISO at Frost Bank. So let's bring Edward onto the stage. Edward, thank you so much for being here. Really appreciate you making the time and lending your wisdom to be a judge today.
Thanks, Rich, for having me. Appreciate it.
And we have Alexandra Landegger, the Executive Director and CISO at Collins Aerospace. Alexandra, super excited to hear what you think of these vendors and to dig into some of your questions.
Absolutely. Looking forward to it, and happy Friday.
Yes, happy Friday indeed. What could be better than the finals for Capture the CISO? This is going to be a lot of fun. Now, our judges have already watched some short demos. They've checked out our previous episodes from Capture the CISO, so they know what these products do, and they've come armed with some questions. If you have not yet done so, if maybe you're watching this live or you're watching this later, you can check out the demos still from our contestants. We have the finalists right at the top of the page. Go to our site, CISOseries.com, and look for the Capture the CISO icon. It's bright blue. It's the only blue one, so it's easy to find. So be informed, because we are just going to be diving right into it. Right before we get started, though, I just to set the table, to let our listeners know kind of where our CISO judges are coming from. Alexander, I'm going to start with you. Just real quick, what gets you excited about a new vendor solution?
So as in my former career as a consultant, we worked with everybody across all sorts of different customer bases. And now being sort of in-house at Collins, really seeing it from a different lens, honestly, I geek out about the finances. There's lots of great stories, but how does the data pair up to the finances in terms of sort of the cost value analysis? So total mathlete nerd over here.
I like it. That's a fantastic perspective. Edward, what about you?
For me, it's about solving problems. And if I see something on my board presentation or any of my executive reports time and time again, if a vendor can actually get that off of my report, then for me, that's about showing credibility that we're improving. So for me, that's what excites me.
All right. So our contestants, you know kind of where our CISOs are coming from here. What's going to impress them? Let's start let's start with the first person in the CISO hot seat. We're going to be welcoming on Omer Singer, the VP of Strategy over at Anvologic. Omer, thank you so much for joining us today. Really appreciate you making the time. We have Attila on.
Yep.
Can we get Omer on, please? Thank you so much. Believe me, Attila, alphabetically, you would go first by first name, so that probably is the issue there. Omer, thank you so much for being here. Really appreciate coming back and being excited for these finals.
Good to be here, Rich. Thank you.
Anvologic, really impressed our judges with your solution around unifying your SIM and data lake and kind of breaking free of that SIM lock-in. I think that was a really compelling story that definitely resonated with our judges. So I'm really excited to hear what the questions are going to be this time. Edward, why don't we get started with you? What do you want to hear more about from Anvologic?
Yeah, absolutely. So, Omar, real quick question for you. So, the Verizon breach report recently came out, and in that report, there's a lot of good content around what has been successful around exploiting companies. So, I'm curious: has your company looked at that report, and do you all, put signatures together, maybe even put some like canned reports or canned content that your customers can now say, listen, I can attack that report and solve for some of these top breaches in our company may be protected from?
Yeah, absolutely. We have a research team called The Forge, and they keep up both with industry reports and also threat intelligence as it comes out, news about different threat actors and what they're doing. And we build these threat signatures, both atomic detections and scenario-based detections that connect the dots. And what's unique about our approach is that we build them consistently for traditional monolithic SIEMs like Splunk and Azure Sentinel, and also in SQL for the data lake. And that way, teams that are just ramping up with their data skills can benefit from the research that we're doing and the content that we're putting out.
All right.
Alexandra, feel free to jump in here. What do you want to hear more about from Anvologic?
So, as I was reading through the website, I thought one of your problem statements in particular really resonated with me. If you're trying to cut Splunk costs by forking data to cheaper storage, in turn creating detection gaps with dark data in S3 buckets, is one of the things that your website reads. But how real is your solution at solving this problem? What's the data show around attacks found because of this added visibility? What's the data show around, sort of false positives and sort of extra work the SOC has to take on? What's the facts that go behind this amazing feeling of a problem statement?
Such a great question. Thank you for asking. So the first thing, I think having that proof is important because we are the world's first multi-data platform SIEM. So naturally, there's a question around, well, does this work? And I think the extra skepticism is warranted given SIEM being in the headlines lately, and maybe not for the best reasons, right? You have Splunk getting folded into Cisco, Exabeam and Logarithm getting mashed together. IBM is telling all of its customers that they need to switch over to Palo Alto networks now, and it's a big shakeup that's happening. Clearly, customers are expecting their solutions to do more, and I think it goes back to the promise of the SIEM and whether SIEMs have been successful as being a single source of truth for the security operations. My experience, typical SIEM deployments, these monolithic SIEMs, they get less than half of the data, and that's where we're able to change the outcomes by unifying the monolithic SIEM together with these very scalable, very cost-effective data lakes. What we're seeing is upwards of 80% cost savings for any use case that gets moved from the traditional SIEM to the data lake. But what that cost effectiveness does that I think is more important is let you collect data that otherwise would stay siloed in the source solution or in the bucket. And we're absolutely seeing customers do really exciting things with that capability. So we're seeing customers load a lot of EDR data, for example, into the data lake that was just could never fit into the SIEM. And then they apply these detections correlating between what's going on the endpoint and what's going on in the operating system or in the cloud control plane. And there's just a ton of new detections that they're able to do, attacks that they're able to catch. And I'll share with you just one example that really kind of stood out to me, where a certain organization brought on a contractor that was given access to the cloud control plane, supposed to admin it from the company provided laptop, but they took the creds and they switched it over to their personal laptop. Now that'd be very hard to detect because these are valid creds, right? But by correlating between what's happening on the endpoint and what's happening in the cloud control plane, then this organization identified that, hey, something's up. Is this a compromised user? They reached out and turns out he's been doing this for a very long time. Nobody spotted him because we're able to correlate across these very large data sets in the data lake with logs going to the traditional SIEM. Then that detection is now possible.
A question for you along the same lines around cost. So when a typical deployment happens, we see the SKUs, we see the bid, and we understand the cost of the relationship. Sometimes that's not right in our faces, the cost of the partnership. And I'm curious, when you come into an engagement, there are times where you need to bring in professional services, or you need to bring in a group of people that will help not only allow us to understand your technology, but allow us to understand how our technology stack integrates with your technology. So in that type of engagement, what should we be expecting? Who should we be bringing to the table? What's that cost look like? Because for me, it's more than just the license and the agreement. There's a larger cost associated to this partnership. So can you tell me what that looks like?
Yeah, very true. So the Analogic license model is a flat model, which I think is very important for SIM, because any ingest-based pricing is going to discourage the team from getting the visibility they need to effectively deal with threats. Now, where we, I think, introduce a new parameter that, to your point, absolutely worth understanding, is we're saying the SOC can start using the same cloud data platform as the rest of the enterprise. This wasn't always the case. And so now you need to start saying, well, if I don't need to worry about ingest-based pricing with my SIM, because Analogic has that flat pricing, I do need to understand how a cloud data platform like Snowflake charges. Now, the good news is these solutions are deployed across virtually every enterprise at this point. And so I would suggest working with the data team that's already serving marketing and finance and all these different departments. They just haven't been able to work with security because security has always been off to the side working on its own stack. Now it's like, well, how do you guys set up cost guardrails? How do you set up monitoring so I don't have the surprise bill at the end of the year? Right? And how do I optimize my costs as I bring on new data sources? Maybe some of them I can accept a little bit more latency to have a lower cost. Maybe some I need to detect more frequently, closer to real time, and some I can just sweep them once a day, right? So I think that is the ultimate partner, is bringing security together with the data team, the CIO's organization that's managing cost and the cloud data platform for the rest of the company, and working with them to have predictable and lower costs for the security operation.
Thanks. Appreciate that.
Kind of just continuing down the path around cost savings for a moment. You mentioned earlier sort of 80% is typical of what some of your customers are seeing. Does that vary based on customer size, customer industry, complexity, global sort of presence? What sort of changes that 80% number, and what's the full range?
So it's pretty consistently over 80%. It might be, even more than that, but I think that's a number that we all feel comfortable is kind of sufficient to justify looking at a new direction. Where that number comes from is, if you look at the traditional monolithic SIMs designed to run in a data center where you had fixed hardware, and those servers, they're spinning 24/7. If you want to add more data, you need to add more systems, right? And that's how you scale it. What's happened over the last 5 to 10 years is, in the cloud data platform space, ton of innovation. They're using cloud native storage, which is very cheap and limitless, and they separate it from compute. And in security, that ends up working very nicely because you got a lot of data. You don't know, you're not going to need all of it, but you don't know which parts you're going to need and which not. So it works very nicely to put all that data in cloud native storage within the cloud data platform, and then just pay for the compute when you need it. Usually not so much. If there's an incident, then maybe scale it up and have the power you need to get back answers to the board quickly. I think that could maybe account for some variance. If there is a breach situation, you're going to want more compute. You're going to want to go back maybe months. By the way, in the cloud data platform, it's all hot data. So you don't need to rehydrate. You go back months, identify the entry point, and then come up with the blast radius that you could report back to the board, back to customers that are anxiously waiting to hear, right, how they've been affected. In that case, since you've used more compute resources, probably the total cost will be higher for that period. But then I would say it's probably kind of a good problem to have, in that you can justify that additional cost in that it was dealing with a breach. The other area that can change the cost is how much data science is going on. So what we see is more advanced organizations, they have all this great log data in an analytics platform. Now they can start training machine learning models on it. They can start doing inference and identifying things like, for example, a risk factor for individuals in the company or for assets, creating recommendations around how to tune detections, which additional log sources bring in. So all those additional use cases do increase the cost, but I would say you can justify that. That's warranted because it comes with additional value.
So a question for you, maybe around deployment, and this is around, you helping us be successful. I've seen so many times where projects are challenged in deployment. And a lot of times it's because we don't know your project as well as we think we do. And so one of the challenges we have is we give vague business requirements or maybe our own interpretation of what we think success looks like. So I'm curious, what guidance would you give us around a very successful business requirement that we can not only achieve, but we can achieve in a timely manner that actually equates to an optimal deployment?
Great question. And I'll share with you kind of on a personal story. Before I was at Anvlogic, I was at Snowflake for almost 6 years. I ran security engineering there, and I saw there's the phenomenal cost effectiveness of this platform, how well it handles log data. And I was telling my friends, my peers in the industry, and the adoption was not anywhere near what I would expect. And I think it's because of what you're describing, where like there are business outcomes, and if you can't be confident that they will be achieved, it doesn't matter how much savings are, there in theory. Now, what Anvlogic does, which is very unique, we're the only company that does this, with the multi-data platform SIM, you can start with an initial deployment just on the existing SIM and see that you're able to manage the detections, you're getting recommendations, it's all good. It's all working on your existing SIM. No real changes there to the kind of underlying data platform. Identifying a use case that makes sense to start, migrate that one to the data lake, but keep sending the data to the SIM. So during the initial deployment, what I would suggest is have the data going both to the traditional SIM and to the new data lake, deploy equivalent detections across both, and see that the outcomes are the same. And that way you have the confidence that just kind of through adopting this additional technology, you haven't disrupted your existing processes. Kind of the downstream SOAR is doing what it's been doing. The reporting is doing what it's always been doing. And just then with that confidence, kind of kill the feed to the traditional, the monolithic SIM, and kind of then you go use case by use case. And that incremental approach, I have customers looking to get off of their SIM that they're saying this is a 3-year project. That's fine because you have that horizon and you can show cost savings over time. You can show a reduction in visibility gaps in dark data over time with confidence that you're not taking on additional risk, that it's kind of this rip and replace migration where, something that we used to be able to detect, we can't detect anymore. That would be my emphasis, and really treat it as a use case by use case migration rather than a full cut over rip and replace.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Well, thank you so much, Omer. That just about does it for this final round of questioning. I think we all could agree we could go a lot longer on this, but some really great answers and some great stuff going on in our chat. We have Chris, Alex, Dr. X, strong username, by the way, just kind of digging more into that cost and value conversation and using some car metaphors, which is always appreciated. So, Omer, thank you once again for sitting in that CISO hot seat one more time and just giving some great answers and some great food for thought.
Thanks, all.
All right. So up next, we are going to have Bugproof CEO and founder Attila Saz coming on. Attila, thank you so much for coming back and for getting ready to sit in the hot seat. Are you ready for the questions?
Yeah, thank you for having me. Excited to be here.
Yeah, and I can just say, as one of the hosts of Cybersecurity Headlines, we're talking about IoT security. Like, it's such a huge topic for us. And it was just what you guys are doing with automated firmware analysis and that kind of stuff really stood out to me. And kind of where you guys are playing in the market was really speaking to me. Definitely left a strong impression on our judges as well. Alexandra, I'm going to start out with you. What do you want to hear more about from Attila and Bugproof?
All right. So looking at the website and some of the previous conversations, see that you're definitely creating some presence in certain industries like automotive. But what industries do you want to get into? What has been hard for you to break into, and why do you think that is?
Oh, that's an excellent question. I mean, so the way we see it, there are basically all those industries where we have a technological fit. Like we actually support embedded Linux primarily, BSD-based devices. We have a good fit in many industries, be it like manufacturing, industrial manufacturing, networking devices, a lot of consumer devices. But on the lower end of like compute power, you see IoT devices running either like bare metal software or running some kind of real-time operating systems also. So you see these wearable devices, you see all of these sensor devices connected for in different like in agriculture, you see a lot of these wide area low power connectivity, where those kind of firmware needs like a different treatment in terms of like firmware analysis. So it's definitely on our roadmap to develop our research capabilities and improve our engines to be able to scan those devices as well meaningfully. Also, the medical sector, as I pointed out in the last episode, is tricky for us because it's dominated by Microsoft technology and Windows-based systems.
I was so excited to talk to you about this topic because it's not a topic that elevates to the board often. And it's a problem that we all recognize, and it's a problem that has been there for a long time. And I think, watching the previous episode, I think, they opened with, we're so glad you're here, and we're so glad you're bringing the solution to the space. And so, I have a question for you. As a CISO, I have to take a risk-based approach. And I want to bring you to an audience that's never heard of you, that's never heard of the problem that you're solving, which is IoT. And so I need to elevate the conversation with them. And the way you start that is you really have to understand first the landscape, and we have to understand how do we introduce you to those that need to remediate. And so it's kind of like a two-part question, but the first part is for those that are receiving the input, how do I get you into the hands of those that are the remediators? And what I mean by that is they have to prioritize efforts, and they have assets that are servers, they have assets that are external facing, and they have assets that are rated with a certain criticality, and now they have to focus on IoT. How do I make it important for them to focus on IoT? What's your advice to me to make sure that they know you're as important as those other assets?
I mean, there are a couple of companies being pretty successful at delivering asset visibility systems for IoT. Like in the general IT security space, you've seen a lot of these devices emerge that are able to detect IoT devices on your network. So at least you are aware of these devices having sort of vulnerabilities. And what we really want to stress with our solution is that we are actually able to peek into the firmware of these devices, and there's a lot of remote code execution vulnerabilities in there, which will not be remediated by those visibility platforms. But how to do that it's not easy. So because at some point you want to be able to get those suppliers of yours to either handle the firmware to you or get their systems tested by us. And this has been plaguing the industry for a while. And here, basically, we kind of relying on the compliance pressure coming up. So in the US, you have the cyber trust mark. That's more for consumer devices, but there are also standards for industrial devices that will actually make it mandatory for those devices to have a baseline level of security. And that's where those companies can enter our solution, where they will be forced to be able to present some kind of certificate for their devices, and we can help with that, and we can also help with actually digging deeper. We can actually kind of substitute for even like an IoT device pen test that would cost each of these suppliers for like something like 20K each. So this is how we can help. As an operator, as someone having just these devices in your network, it's about your contractual relationship with those particular suppliers, and your kind of your responsibility to get them do this now. But hopefully these compliance and regulatory changes will make a difference here.
I appreciate it. Thanks.
So speaking of compliance, I've noticed that it's definitely a hot topic that you regularly reference. What frameworks and standards are coming up next in your roadmaps? Maybe you don't meet the requirements today, but over the next 12, 24 months, where else do you plan to expand some of these compliance requirements?
Yeah, so in the EU, we have ETSI, which is the baseline for many of the compliance requirements on a technical level, but also for the Cyber Resilience Act that will be probably written into law like late Q3 this year. It might actually use a standard that's being worked out by Senelec. And in the US, all of this is handled by NIST, by a NIST standard. So we are actually working towards supporting those requirements with our product and being able to track those requirements and match our automated findings to those requirements and see if there's a violation or if we can really make sure that none of those are violated in some cases.
So a question for you, and this might be on the executive side. So McKinsey put out a report recently, and they sent it to all the boards of publicly traded companies, and they called out the top risk was IoT because of how long it takes to remediate and because of how long it's gone neglected. And so that was a top risk that was sent to these boards. And so, of course, boards are talking to the executive team saying, hey, first of all, what's IoT, right? And we'd love to see some types of metrics here. I'm curious, in your platform, are you all looking at some type of executive reporting, some type of trending, some type of report that can be produced out of your platform that might start to give some type of visibility as to the risk exposure that are present based on what you're seeing?
Yeah, so within our platform, we are able to generate like a high-level executive summary for on a device and project basis. And we can also do that for a whole product portfolio. But again, this requires you to have the necessary artifacts, build artifacts that you might not necessarily have today as an operator of those devices. On the other hand, yeah, I mean, this is a huge problem, and we also see and we closely monitor the status of this, how like all these legacy hardware manufacturers are putting those devices and connecting them to the internet, and more and more of the budget that they're working with is actually software development. So down the line, we believe in a system where basically an IoT DevSecOps kind of system where you have secure OTA updates and you have a constant feedback to the engineering teams and back to the executive teams in terms of the risks and the security controls in place within their organization.
Perfect. Thanks.
All right. Well, I've got one more question. We haven't talked finances yet. So, knowing that IoT is, it's a complicated landscape, extremely thin profit margins when you're talking automotive, medical devices, industrial manufacturing, right? So, what's the pricing model? And is it based on number of users, upload volume, number of scans? Like, how are you pricing today? And do you expect that to change as you continue to scale your business?
Right now, we have a tier-based subscription model. We are actually pretty proud of that. We have transparency here. So we have a monthly plan, a monthly pro plan that you can just start using. This is even good for security labs doing like IoT pen test work. But we can also definitely support enterprise use cases. And there we scale with the file size because that's, it's kind of different to handle like big automotive infotainment firmware compared to, say, a little consumer router. So that's one dimension. And the other dimension is, number of users in the workspace and a number of scans. And on top of that, like one of our main differentiator compared to our competitors is this engine we call PRIS, which is able to actually deliver insights into zero-day vulnerabilities. So we are able to detect without source code, those kind of vulnerabilities that might end up being the most likely to be exploitable. But those are in exchange are kind of compute heavy on our side. So if you scale with that dimension, it will be represented in your final bill. But in general, we are product led, and we are pretty proud of being transparent with our pricing.
Yeah, and I know that really resonates definitely with a lot of people in our audience and a major pain point kind of in this industry. So kudos to you, Attila. Attila Saz, the CEO and founder of Bugproof. Thank you so much. And just kind of reiterate what Matthew was saying in our chat, embedded security is a big need of attention for sure. So I hope people have checked out your demos and checked out everything along with all the other contestants. But just again, something that is constantly kind of on our radar. So thank you so much for sitting in that CISO hot seat, answering the questions, and giving the good knowledge. Really appreciate your time.
Thank you for having me.
All right. All right, so 2 contestants down in these finals for Capture the CISO. Edward, Alexandra, how are we feeling? Are we ready to finish off this triumvirate of finalists and maybe start deliberating after that? How are we feeling?
We're excited.
Absolutely, 100%.
Excellent. So without further ado, let's bring on Russell Spittler from Nudge Security, the CEO and co-founder of Nudge Security. Russell, welcome back. Really appreciate you coming back for these finals, and I'm really excited to hear what the judges are going to be asking.
Excited to be here.
Yeah, Nudge Security. Russell, when you were on here last time, you had this really unique approach to SaaS security, kind of the whole visibility question there. That definitely really struck me as novel and interesting, and I know that resonated with the judges too. So I'm going to lead off, Edward. What do you want to hear more about from Nudge?
Yeah, there was a statement made in the last call and so I have to reference that as well, but it might not be a popular one. But I'll tell you, when we talk about the problem you're solving, we call it, business technology or business T. And I think what's interesting is, you're really in a space that's going to solve a huge problem for so many companies because it is just a widespread problem. But what gets me nervous is that phrase that somebody else said is this a hype cycle? Is this something that's just another, security scorecard company? And I liked your answer, but the challenge is, how do we demonstrate that? Because it is so new and you're doing something so inversed as, looking at positive things as opposed to the negative things. So I'm curious, what are you doing to make your company not be that hype cycle and really showing that value add?
Yeah, so the important thing is there's 2 things that were kind of discussed during that last commentary. Is the core focus of our company is helping you find all the accounts your employees are creating across all those SaaS applications. And that is not a hype cycle. That's a trend that's been continuing for the last 10 years plus at this point. Now, the second question is, once you discover those accounts and the number of SaaS applications that you're using, which ones do you need to worry about? And that's really where it comes into play and where we start talking, because on average, we find about 1.5 apps per employee. So if you're talking about a 5,000 employee company, you expect a list of 7,000 things, and nobody wants a list of 7,000 things. What we now need to focus on is which companies have their acts together in a way that's publicly referenceable, which ones are handling sensitive data, but might not have that public referenceability. That's a place to start. That's not the end all be all, but that allows people to start quickly matching up against their internal compliance requirements, against their company standards, and start to focus on the areas where they need to get better clarification so that they can mitigate what potential risk might be there.
Perfect, thanks.
So just looking at a company like mine, we have, multiple domains, multiple cloud environments, multiple legal entities. We're all around the globe, which means we've got to meet different monitoring requirements, privacy requirements. The same could be said about GM, GE, Merck, right? I mean, pick your big manufacturing company. There's a lot of complications that kind of get in the way of being able to to roll out technologies like yours. Can you provide an example where you've worked with a multinational company, and how did you work your way through getting, works council approvals to make sure that you can actually fully deploy and truly achieve the full visibility that you claim to?
Now, the question always comes down to the legal team at the organization that we're working with, because there's two very different perspectives that get employed. On one hand, corporate communications is something that typically falls under the purview that should and can be monitored. And ultimately, when we look at employee activity in the context of their work, there's a lot of security requirements for monitoring those employees in some form or another. Now, where we start to, find some opportunities for discussion is probably the best way to put it, is when you get into some of the countries where they have very strict data locality requirements. The way that we've navigated that in the past is we primarily work with Microsoft 365 and Google Workspace companies who are hosted on those platforms. And so what we try to do is co-locate the analysis that we perform with those sort of hosting providers. So if you're using the European region for Google Workspace, et cetera. And so then we can start to reduce any potential data locality, crossing the regions as we're doing our analysis. Then when it comes into it, what are we actually observing about those end customers, those end employees? It's their corporate use. And so those conversations definitely come into play, as you might imagine. But ultimately, if you can start to make sure that you are compartmentalizing the analysis, setting up a region for different parts of your workforce, as well as sort of navigating, the sort of balance between the security, visibility alongside that sort of employee privacy, that allows us to cover most regions. There's certainly some where we still have some challenges, but we do have customers in Germany, in France, in the United Kingdom, et cetera, that do have some rather strict requirements, and we've been able to work with our customers in order to navigate those.
And speaking of your access to email, because it's an intriguing way to identify accounts, but I work for a financial institution, and so the way that I'm regulated by both state and Fed, that means those same regulations now, flow through and apply to you. I'm also a publicly traded company in the U.S., which means the SEC now also flows through and apply to you. So in those scenarios, how do you approach that, knowing you're not a bank and those are very rigorous and very demanding? How do you approach that?
Yeah, so the email access is obviously something that we kept in mind as we founded the company. My co-founder and I both come from deep security backgrounds, and we certainly did our best to not only employ the best practices that we knew how, but get other advisors in there to make sure that we're doing what we could to mitigate that risk. As it comes into play, what we try to do is first and foremost, Google and Microsoft are already, accessing all those emails and the deployments that we operate in. In addition, you probably have Proofpoint, Mimecast, Abnormal, whatever your favorite email security company of the month is. And so just reminding people that this is a traditional security control point is usually the first hurdle that we have to get across. Once we get past that conversation, what we then remind people of, or explain to people, is that we're only looking at the inbound emails coming from these SaaS providers. So we actually use the search APIs to look for machine generated emails. So that's from known senders, known communication patterns. And so we can actually constrain what we're analyzing substantially compared with what you might get in obviously a traditional gateway or the mail provider themselves, which allows us to kind of reduce that. And then of course we have ephemeral analysis, so we don't ever store or persist that email in memory, which allows us to kind of, again, reduce that attack vector or the risk that comes along with the giving people access to that email further, which allows us to start to have those conversations in sort of a productive way as people evaluate our solution.
And maybe even a follow-up question to that. There are times where employees may register personal accounts using their corporate email addresses, maybe ChatGPT, maybe their Amazon account, and maybe even to this streaming service that they're watching us here right now. How do you make a distinction between what's personal and what's corporate?
Well, Edward, I hate to be the one bursting your bubble, but ChatGPT sometimes is used for work, whether you want to or not. But that's certainly the case in a lot of the deployments that we see, and you'd be surprised at the range of sort of personal accounts that show up there, anywhere from doctor's appointments to little league, registration to anything that comes through there. So one of the areas that we really focus on is trying to identify those sort of personal accounts versus the corporate accounts. And we actually do have workflows that allow you to help work with that end employee in order to migrate those personal accounts out of corporate infrastructure. That's a benefit for the end employee. They don't want to lose their health records just because they change jobs, or they don't want to miss their little league game because they can't log into their laptop. And what we've seen is that's also a benefit for the corporations, because sometimes there's accounts that are of more sensitive nature that companies don't want associated with their corporate infrastructure. And also, as it comes into play, when we do see these data breaches in these personal consumer services, often that ends up with indirect exposure. People reusing passwords at their Netflix that they are using in some other SaaS service that they're using for corporate usage. And of course, the sort of spray and pray approaches that we see from attackers come into play. And so we really want to help people get those accounts out. So we try to, again, categorize and classify lifestyle apps, shopping apps, are things that we help focus on. And then we have the ability for end employees to sign into our platform and actually see what our platform knows about that end employee. Nobody else, just that individual. And that allows them, the security organization, to facilitate that migration interaction with that end employee.
Appreciate it.
So looking at your website, I really liked the sliding scale of savings, based on your company side. I think just personally, it's a really cool visual. But now let's talk real numbers for a moment. $4 per mailbox per month. At a company like mine, that means over $3 million a year. And that's just one tool in a very large set of security tools. And so that's a big cost, right? And so how do you work with customers? I know you've noted that you try to be cost positive. How are you really working with customers to ensure that cost savings are at least in the ballpark of that kind of expense?
Well, first and foremost, I can tell you I can make a great deal for you, but really no. But we use we're a product-led growth model. Part of what we're doing is we're solving a problem that most people don't think can be solved. And so we make it easy for people to sign up for a free trial on our website and get running. With that said, that pricing model goes up to about 2,500 employees. And then we flip over to an ELA model, because we very well respect that once you get into larger organizations, seat-based pricing doesn't work. And we've known that for a while. Vendors are starting to catch on. Particularly in manufacturing organizations, there's often large numbers of sort of non-computer workers that might have a different risk profile. And so when we get into those organizations, our price is far different than the 3 million that you calculated. However, what we've actually observed in reality is, even for smaller organizations, one company estimated they're saving about 8 to 12 hours a week. And that was just in response to the IT team and security team getting requests for systems they don't manage. So somebody says, hey, I need this Salesforce add-on integrated and I need another seat for somebody in the team. And the person in the security team or IT team saying, I don't even know about it, much less how to give you access. Now they sign into our system. Oh, great. Bobby Joe was the guy who set it up 4 years ago, and I can access it over here. And so when you think about the efficiencies that come into that sort of, at your fingertips knowledge and visibility and insight into the environment, you end up with a very cost effective model, even, as you think about the time that you're going to save to using it.
And we just had one quick question coming from TC Nizikovsky, the CISO over at Nextdoor. And I just thought this is kind of adjacent to what we were just talking about. So I just wanted to bring this up real quick. He wanted to know about how you are helping customers save money on underutilized SaaS licensing. And have you been able to pay for yourself? I thought that was kind of analogous.
I am a cybersecurity guy by heart. I've been doing it my entire career, and it was just like a wonderful accident when we found that we could use this to actually save SaaS license costs. So there's kind of, two major categories of license savings that we end up finding. One is, oh my God, you have half the company on Asana, another half the company on Monday.com, and it's always another half the company on Jira, and there's some overlap in between, right? Well, great. I just found 3 project platforms. Let's consolidate some of the licensings. Let's migrate a few people from here to there, and let's just get rid of a line item. The other one, and we just did a deployment the other day, and it was so beautiful because we were having pricing conversations as always, and how are you going to pay for yourself? And I said, well, let me show you this feature of remove abandoned accounts. And of course, this is a security requirement. Why was in there? If you haven't logged in 90 days, we should get rid of the account. I go to that screen. I show you all the accounts where people haven't logged in 90 days, and it was full of Box.com and Salesforce accounts. And anybody who's ever paid the bill for Box and Salesforce knows that I probably paid for myself after I went through the first 20 people on there, much less the scrolling list that continued on. And so really being able to identify those sort of inactive accounts, those abandoned accounts is huge. Being able to find these sort of redundant populations of apps. The other thing that we just rolled out is the ability to find shadow instances. So you might be using ServiceNow, but not knowing that there's another group using ServiceNow over in a different department. We can now detect who's using different instances. And of course, just rolling up those instances is a huge win. Gosh, I could keep going. They're also being able to find rogue AWS accounts, showing you that the sort of one that was spun up in a Skunkworks project and billing 10 grand a month. All of those things start to roll into that cost savings. TC, I appreciate the question.
Well, we appreciate you answering the question, Russell Spittler, the CEO and co-founder over at Nudge Security. You are released from the CISO hot seat. Thank you,
Thank you all
again for just stepping up to the plate, answering questions. As with all 3 of our contestants, Russell, we're going to send you to the wing right now, but I think this is going to be a really tough decision for our judges. But judges, before we send you away to deliberate and come up with your final scores and declare a winner. Real quick, the thing that's just stood out to me here from both of you, and we kind of got into this with our first question about what excites you about new products, but is really, how these vendors can help connect security to the rest of the business, right? Like how can we help tell a better story? I'm just curious from your perspective, from our 3 criteria, because I can see it kind of across all 3. When you're thinking about a vendor, do you think about that more as a vendor innovation, right? When we're talking about, hey, do you have like executive summaries that we can pass on to the board? Is that a deployment capability, or is that helping to fill a need? Like if they can tell that story, that is a market need right there. I'm just curious for both of you, where does that kind of fall in the criteria, Edward?
There's two different vendors that solve 2 different problems for me, right? One of these vendors would really be intriguing with my CFO, and another one would be really intriguing with our CIO, and so they both play a different role here, and so I think it's intriguing that they can solve problems, and it's intriguing that they would both be energetic at the executive level. So it was exciting to hear them. The person that I thought would be the winner before I came here probably was not the winner after the conversation. So so I was excited, and so I appreciate the conversations.
And Alexander, for you, kind of where in that criteria does that like business connect kind of fall for you?
So it's as cyber executives, it's our job to connect zeros and ones to dollars and cents, right? And so it's really nice when we have a vendor that knows how to tell their story and sell their value. It makes our jobs a lot easier. The questions that then we need to take forward as we're talking to our CFOs, our boards, our teams is really understanding, okay, this is a great story, but how much of this is fact? What would it actually look like in our specific environment to really make that decision the right way?
All right. Well, judges, we're going to send you to the wing now. Please mute your mics. Tally up your scores. Please send them to the big boss man, David Spark, and he will alert me when those are in. But I'm going to need our 3 contestants back. I'm going to need Russell, Attila, and I'm going to need Omer back. We are going to play a quick game. This is a fun one that we usually play on Super Cyber Friday. It's a little game we like to call Public Interest. And this game is very simple. Essentially, what you are going to be doing is telling me which is the most searched for out of a set of terms. And if you like this game, remember you can join us for our next Super Cyber Friday that's coming up on the 31st of May, Hacking Microsoft Copilot. You can see the link to register right down below. It's in green and easy to see. But let's get into the public interest. So our first set of terms here, most average monthly search queries: bug, flaw, vulnerability, or error. I'm going to start with you, Attila, since you're at the top of my screen.
Oh man. I would say bug.
Okay, we got one for bug. Omer, where are you sitting on this?
I'm biased here, but
Sure. I'm going to go with error. I feel like people get errors from all sorts of different directions.
That's true. They're looking them up. They don't know what these errors are all about. Russell, where are you at?
I like flaw. It reminds me of coleslaw.
There is very little rhyme or reason to any of these, so we will see which is the winner here, and the winner is bug. Oh, Attila playing for the home crowd and gets a point. All right, our next one here is, all right, most average monthly search queries. Now this is just weird. These terms are coming up: nudge, push, prod, or urge. Russell, I'm going to start with you.
It's got to be nudge.
Wow, it's got to be nudge. The confidence, he knows. He's looked at the SEO folks, so take that with a grain of salt. Omer, where are you at with this?
I'll go with push.
Push, okay. And Attila, what's working for you?
Can I go with push as well? I don't know.
You can also go for push.
Yeah, push for me. That was my first idea.
Push it to production. Like I totally see it. I like this. All right, let's see what the winner is. Come on, slideshow, help me. And our winner is prod. Omer, was that you? Or no, were you pushed too?
No. I was.
All right. So Attila, you are still in the lead. Russell, I'm sorry for nudge. I just pulled the list.
I had to.
All right, here. And our last one, Omer, I couldn't find a lot of synonyms for anvil. So I went with logic here. This is not our last one. This is the second last one. Logic, reason, sense, analysis.
Yeah, I got to go with logic.
Okay, yeah. We got to go with logic. Maybe you're a music producer. I don't know. Attila, where's your head at?
Reason. For me. Yeah.
Okay, reason. Okay, maybe a Kant fan. I don't know. And Russell, what do we got here?
I think it's got to be reason. What's the reason my baby's crying? People do that all the time.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. All right, well, let's see what the winner is. Oh, a resounding win for logic. So we have a tie here. Attila and Omer each with one, and here is going to be, we might have a three-way tie. Who knows here? All right, most average monthly search queries, cybersecurity, Cybertruck. Russell, I'm going to start with you here. You need the points. Wait. No. I'm going to leave you for last. You need the points. I'll let you be the contrarian if you want to. Attila, I'm going to start with you.
Cybersecurity.
All right, we got one for cybersecurity. Omer?
I'm with him for cybersecurity, but if we need a tiebreaker, I'm okay with going with N2. What do you think?
We can have this is just for fun. Russell, where are you going?
The only way to win is Cybertruck.
All right. So let's see who we got here. Oh, cybersecurity. It was close. So Attila and Omer both tying for the win in the public interest. Thank you guys so much for playing our silly game here. And I'm going to, let's see here. Hold on. Let me take our slides down. And we'll hide that. All right. So we will reconvene here. All right, contestants, we are going to send you to the wing here, and we'll bring our judges back to talk about our winners here, and then we'll talk here. All right. Okay. Looking at the judges' feedback here, it was really close. Everybody here, like, there's a reason all three of these vendors were finalists. They made it very, very tough to come up with the winner here. In third place, we had Anvilogic making a great showing, making it to the finals here, still being very impressive. Bugproof came in second, and that means Nudge Security is the winner. Russell, can we get Russell back on the stage here for a hearty congratulations here? Russell, just imagine the confetti is falling. Maybe we'll put something in post. I'm not here to promise anything, but Russell, congratulations on winning season 2 of Capture the CISO. We're knocking out of the park every episode, and I think just really resonated with what our judges were looking for today.
Oh, I really appreciate it, and thank you guys so much for obviously giving your time to judge us here today.
Judges, any parting words, I guess, from both of you for Nudge here about the ultimate win here?
Well, I'll just start by saying I think some of the best cyber initiatives I've seen across my decade plus in the field is when we are able to give value back to the business. Saw this in a couple of different industries where, all of a sudden, hey, we can solve a recall problem in automotive, or we can solve this problem in a medical device industry. Being able to bring value to the business, bring cost down, not just be a red mark on the P&L sheet is a difference maker. And so when we can accomplish more than one mission, it certainly helps. But certainly, again, shout out to the other two, because IoT security, we all need help there. And our SOC SIM solutions, we have way too complicated of a cyber defense environment, every single one of us. And so creating those sort of interconnection points will help all.
Yeah, I think, and I agree. It's really easy to talk security with a lot of the people, a lot of our peers at the board, at the executive level. Cost preservation is something that's unique for us. And so when you can come in and impress your CFO and talk about cost preservation, especially in these times, I think that's something that resonates with every executive. And so it's an easy conversation. It's an easy win. And I agree completely. When you can pay for yourself before the end of the contract, that's a no-brainer when it comes to a business decision. So congratulations.
Yeah, congratulations again, Russell and Nudge Security, the whole team over there at Nudge Security, just bringing the fire every single time and sitting in that CISO hot seat. Really, really appreciate it. And also thank you to Omer Singer, the VP of Strategy at Anvalogic, and Attila Saz, the CEO and founder at Bugproof, for making it a tough decision. I think we can all agree. Not an easy choice here for the finals, but we have our season 2 winner. So thank you once again, Russell, for everything. Also, thanks to all of everybody in our audience. And another show that we have coming up, like I mentioned before, we have Super Cyber Friday coming up on May 31st for hacking Microsoft Copilot. If you want to register for that right now, you can click on the link. It will not take you away from this glorious chat. You can still keep watching, and you can still register for that. Good times will be had. You can also find that just over at CISOseries.com. And if you want to talk more to all of our contestants, to all of our judges, to some of our staff and fellow audience members, we are going to have a meetup right after this stream. It's over on Toucan. We've switched the link over at the bottom. Our intrepid producer, Aaron, has taken care of that. Thank you so much, Aaron. You can click on that no matter your level. We just want people to be getting together, having fun conversations, talking about what resonated with you in all three, all of our episodes here with Capture the CISO. I know everybody would love to talk to you. But once again, congratulations to Nudge Security, our season 2 winner. I think that just about does it for this season of Capture the CISO. Thanks for everybody for subscribing, for joining, for having some fun with us in this competitive show and declaring a winner. I think that just about does it for us. Aaron, take us out.